on December 14th, 2012, my life took a sharp left turn. I had been a stay-at-home mom. I have 3 daughters. I have Sophia, Marie, and Josephine. And when Josephine was born, it was clear that she had special needs, and we would learn eventually that she was autistic. So a great deal of my time as a mother was devoted to her needs and to the needs of my family while my husband was commuting to Manhattan. And life was progressing as a busy family life does. It was pretty normal. We were planning a move to Massachusetts, and we were about a month away from that move when December 14th occurred in our lives. And it began as a very ordinary day. It was cold and gray in Connecticut, and it was Friday, finally. And I scooted the kids off after I got their lunches packed and their hair done and broke up a couple fights. I sent the older 2 off ahead of Joey. We call her Joey. They were both bounding off, for school and excited to be with their friends. And Joey wasn't quite feeling herself. She had had a concussion just a couple weeks prior. So I was keeping an eye on her, and I let it be her call that day, whether she go into school or not. So we spent some time on the couch watching Disney. And sure enough, she gave me the sign. She sprung up off the couch, grabbed her backpack and her lunchbox, and headed to the door. So we went off to school as we normally did, and she was met at the door by one of her beloved teachers, and they walked hand in hand into the building. So I drove home, sat down to have some breakfast, and I was probably about 2 bites into my breakfast when the phone rang. And I noticed on the caller ID that it said Town of Newtown. That usually meant that I forgot somebody's lunch, or a permission slip, or something critical. So I picked it up, expecting to hear what I had, messed up. But it was actually the superintendent, a recording of her voice, and she was explaining, very simply, that all of our schools were now in lockdown. There had been a shooting in the Newtown public school system. And that was it. So I put the phone down, and I kind of paged back into my file of experiences as a teacher. I remembered lockdowns, I remembered lockdown practices, I remembered 9/11, being a 2nd grade teacher, and the reunification process that took place in the Baltimore, Washington suburb where I was working. And I thought, we've had lockdowns before. Sometimes there is an event in the community that we need to protect the children from. I'll go and I'll gather some information before I react, before I decide how this day is going to go. So I hopped in the car, and I drove down our long country road, and I have to admit, I had the high school on my mind. I was really headed to the high school. I remembered Columbine all too well. And I passed, on my way to the high school, the intermediate school where my older daughter was. And I saw no activity there. I saw that they were in lockdown, standard position, and there was a cruiser parked out front and a blocked entry. So I proceeded on to the high school area where I saw the same scene, just one cruiser and a blocked entry. And at about that time, emergency vehicles began screaming past me, sirens, lights, moving at high rates of speed. And so I followed them, and they led me to this scene at Sandy Hook. After we received that notification, it was clear that there was an event happening at Sandy Hook, right before the school, and you can see the school is here in an aerial view. To the right side, you have the firehouse, which was located just at the end of the little street that led up to our school. So the scene there was already bustling. There were lots of responder vehicles, and there was already limited parking. So I was able to pull up and park just about in this area. Oops, let me see if I can get back to you. My remote is not cooperating. So I was in the area that leads up to the road there, and as I parked, I noticed that the children were already evacuating. And I noticed streams of children leaving the building together. This is pretty much the scene that I saw, and my second daughter was in one of those lines. And she looked at me, and I saw her face change and relax. I blew her a kiss, and I ran over to her and I said, I'm just gonna go check on Joey. I know that Sophie is safe, and I know that you'll be safe in the firehouse with your teacher in your class. So I sent her off, and I remember thinking how grateful I was as I watched the children leave in such an orderly way. There were several children that were distraught, that were upset and stressed. But for the most part, there was a sense of calm. The adults, and there were lots of them because it was an elementary school, so it was all hands on deck, all of the volunteers, the secretarial staff, the cafeteria staff. Everybody was there to support the students and very devoted to keeping them calm and getting them safely to the firehouse. But I was very grateful that our school had a culture of safety, that we had practiced our off-site evacuation, and that the kids were familiar with the location of the firehouse and knew and recognized that it was a safe place for them. When I got to the firehouse, although the children knew where to go and the staff knew where to go and had a sense of restoring calm, there was chaos, there was confusion. I couldn't find the principal. I couldn't find our lead teacher who functioned as an assistant principal. Couldn't find our school psychologist. I couldn't find Joey's class or her teacher. And so everyone was kind of operating on their own, doing the best with their experience and their knowledge. I assumed that the reason I couldn't find the leadership of the school was that they were dealing with the situation back at the school. So again, I sort of paused and I decided I would go and wait up at the school. And I waited for a very long time. I noticed that there were a lot of responders up there waiting with me, and I couldn't really get any information there. As the children evacuating began to dwindle, I headed back to the firehouse, and I saw the same scene. I saw chaos. I saw that that we had staff members who were at a loss for what to do, and I would learn later that it was because our leadership was gone. Our principal and our lead teacher had been shot. Our school psychologist and principal died instantly in that shooting, and because of that, and because we were not prepared to step into one another's roles, we were left to kind of do our best with what we had, and the staff did an amazing job. But it's critical that in our communities, we are prepared. We understand what the role is of each and every person in the community, the work community, the school community, whatever it may be, so that we are prepared to step into one another's roles. And then beyond that, back at the firehouse, it was clear that with our leadership gone, there was no plan in place for safely, calmly reunifying parents and students. And I cannot say enough about how important it is to prepare for a reunification event in an emergency. For us, the reunification plan was Dawn Hawksbrum and Natalie Hammond, our principal, our lead teacher, and our school psychologist, Mary Sherlock. And they were not there. They were not able to help. All of the information, the class lists, all of the contact information was back in the building, and all of our children and teachers had been evacuated without any of those materials and without the ability to contact parents and safely and calmly reunify them. I did manage in the firehouse to locate the superintendent, and I was sure that she would have answers for me, that she would have the protocol. I kind of paged back to my experiences on 9/11, reunifying my own class with their distraught, hysterical parents. And I remembered the procedures. I remembered that no parents were allowed past the front door without providing their IDs, without signing children out, without providing a contact number should we need to verify that the child was indeed with them. But when I found the superintendent, I found that she was very much in shock herself. And when I asked her about the protocol and what we should do, she simply waved me on to send my daughter Marie home with a friend. She did not have the protocol in place and was not prepared there to help us with that. So luckily it's a small town and a community where we all pitch in and help one another out. Everyone made it home safely as long as they hadn't been injured in the actual incident. But we had several parents that waited in my group of parents in the banquet hall of the firehouse, believing that their child might be at the hospital or might have been injured because a loving, caring neighbor, well-intended, took their child home to get them out of the chaotic scene. And when that information was not recorded, it caused chaos and it caused emotional stress. So that reunification plan has to be solid and has to have redundancy built into it for situations like ours where you might be evacuating off-site. As I'm wandering around the bays at the firehouse that day, I'm wondering what in the world had happened. The only real piece of information I had was that there had been a shooter that entered our building. And as the day went on and I began circulating through the room, talking with the parents that were left waiting like me, I began to piece together what had actually happened. And I learned that a gunman from our community had simply pulled up to school about 15 minutes after I had dropped Josephine off and parked his car in the front entrance area, right here at the front door, and entered our locked building. Even though we had a buzzer system, even though we maintained a single point of access for our building during school hours, he was able to simply break the window next to the front door by shooting it out and had access within less than 2 seconds. Once he obtained access, it made a lot of noise. It was very chaotic. And just down the hall, in the conference room, our principal, our school psychologist, and our lead teacher, who had been in a special education meeting with a parent, came running out to confront that chaos. As soon as they came out of the door, they were met with his gunfire, and